beautiful. Welcome to season 2 of the Africana Woman podcast. My name is Chulu, your host, and I can say it, your chief nosy Parker into people's lives. Guys, don't leave me hanging. I know I'm not the only one who wishes I was a fly on someone's wall. I have always had a fascination for cultures of all kinds. Even now, in my 36 years of living, I sit and look at people thinking, I wonder how they live, how they interact, what they eat, what they do for fun. Okay. But I'll tell you what, nothing can beat being an African. Yeah. I love being an African queen. From our foods, our music, art, hair, fashion, and traditions, there is just so much to celebrate. And yet, on the flip side, there are things in our culture that make us uncomfortable or feel uneasy. Do you remember being a child and questioning an adult about why something is done a certain way? More often than not, you were dismissed for questioning the culture, right? The answer sounded like, that's just how it's done, or keep quiet. Yet, I wonder, is culture so rigid that it cannot change or evolve? Who are the gatekeepers of culture, please? Who are they? And who determines what is relevant and what is outdated? Personally, I like to think that as a collective, we have the power to sift out the parts we don't like, whilst preserving the parts that we do need. But to achieve this delicate balance, it requires having an open and honest conversation about culture. So on the Africana Woman podcast, it is vital that we know our roots. Our roots are the unseen source of our strength, knowledge, and beliefs. They are the things that anchor us so as we do not fall over. However, it is easy to take them for granted because they are hidden from our sight. But guess what? Our roots are the heart of our culture. Every week, I ask an African woman to invite us into her home, to give us a snapshot into what happens behind closed doors. And we talk about all the nuances and complexities of our existence as an African woman in whatever space we occupy. We may not come up with the answer for world peace, but we are certainly raising your awareness of your cultural view. I hope you will join me on this journey of discovery, revelation, and self-awareness. I'm not gonna lie, it may become uncomfortable sometimes. However, I encourage you to push past your unease and challenge yourself to think differently. The simple act of expanding yourself to receive the unknown may be transformational for you. So let's do this. This is season 2 of Africana Woman with Chulu podcast. I'm so excited. Our first Africana woman is Paula Rogo, a true light from Kenya. Paula is an award-winning journalist turned media entrepreneur who specializes in podcasting within Africa and emerging markets. She is currently based in Nairobi. She is the CEO of Kali Media, host of I Have No Idea What I'm Doing podcast. Listen, if you're just starting a business, you need to listen to this podcast. It is very insightful. All right, check it out. I have no idea what I'm doing. Paula is also the co-founder of Africa Podfest. Now listen, I know she won't say it herself, but I will hype my girl up, because she has a very accomplished career. having worked for power media houses like Reuters, PBS NewsHour, Essence Magazine, Christian Science Monitor, US Today, and Ebony. Yes, gal! I'm here for it. She is ripping the continent, and I love it. Woo, okay, please enjoy this conversation that I have with Paula Rogo. Catch you on the other side.
Welcome to the Africana Woman podcast.
Sorry to interrupt you. I was so shocked. I was like, oh, she knows my resume. There's some, I appreciate the research. Thank you. And that introduction. That was amazing. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited. Now, I know you are not usually on the front end, and always people asking you questions, but I'm very excited that you're here just to share your wisdom and all the amazingness that is Paula Rogo. And let's get started. So, my first question, Paula, I know you've had such an amazing journey through life. You have lived on numerous continents and, had different education experiences and work as well. So then my question to you is, why Kenya? Why are you now based in Kenya? Because I know that when you were a child, that was probably where you spent, the least amount of time. But then you have found yourself back on the continent, and I wanted to start there.
Yeah, why Kenya? Because I'm Kenyan. I've always been Kenyan first. So I was born in Sweden, but I've no connection to that country other than filling out official documents, really. And my parents are Kenyan, and we moved to the US from Kenya when I was 12, 13 about, and then I moved back over, almost 20 years later, I'd say. I'm trying to do the calculations of how old I was.
I know.
Close to 20. And for me, even while I was in the US, it had always been home for me. In many ways, when it comes to identity, it's the first place that I say I am. And so it just made a lot of sense to move back. And I think also if you're someone who's been in the diaspora for a long time, there's a hunger and maybe even a sense of the grass is greener on the other side, sense of Africa. And and it's important, I think, if you've been abroad for a while, to try come home and even if you end up going back, come home and see what that is like. So for me, that came a couple of years ago. I decided to move back to Kenya and make my home here. And this is home, at least for now. So I'm glad I made that decision.
Yeah, I know. Certainly, I've had experience, living abroad, and many of my African friends that I came in contact with had a hesitation to come back to the continent and come back to Africa. So I wanted to find out from you, why do you think there's that hesitation?
Right. I think I'm lucky enough that I'm a US citizen. So for me, I always knew if I didn't like it, I could always go back. And sometimes going back, the option of going back, wherever back is abroad, is not open to you once you move back to Africa. And I understand not knowing, especially if you've been there for a while, what will be here. Because we definitely have a huge, huge expectation of what Africa will give to us. And sometimes it can be a little disappointing, depending on what your expectations are, because we put a lot, I did at least, into the image I have of what it would be like to live here, having dealt with racism and all the what deals with on the other side. And so I understand sometimes the hesitation, also depending on what country you're from and what it means to come back as well. When my family moved to the US, a lot of people move forever. This is their lives moving back. And we moved because of my dad's job. So it was always to us temporary. We've come here for work. Home is here. And we've been lucky enough where Kenya is a country where I can move back to, which is not always the case for a lot of people, depending on where they're from. And it's not a hard transition in that my family still very much kept a base here, and I have, friends here that I kept close with. So it was not that difficult. But I also understand I have similar friends who had similar mindsets as the ones you were talking about. So I understand.
Yeah. So tell us about your experience moving back, though. So you moved back as an adult, and then you moved back to be an entrepreneur, start a business. What was that journey like? And I mean, you're still in it, I guess.
Yeah. I was crazy. I think, even though I look back, I was like, ignorance is bliss. Because if I knew what I do now, I don't know if I would take the way. It's hard. And I'll be honest, my experience, I would love to say that my experience moving back home was butterflies and delight. But it's been a very, very hard transition for me, which was also a disappointment for myself because I really saw myself as Kenyan. And so, of course, I could transition well. But when I moved here, I realized, oh, wow, Paula, you are really American. Woo. Like you'd mentioned, I lived in Kenya from when I was 3 to, I guess, 12. So that was 9 years. Why is math not working today? So 9 years. End of the day.
That's my mind all the time.
End of the day. And then I was in the US for a very long time, also with periods of times in other places. And so in many ways, I'm more American or more other than I am actually Kenyan. And that was a disappointment for me to discover. Mostly because it was a bit of an identity crisis. Is if I'm not Kenyan, which I've always held so strongly to, who am I, and so forth. And so I struggled with that. And then also just the struggles of just being adult when you move back, making friends is not as easy. Can someone give me a guidebook about making friends in adulthood and then making friends in adulthood in a new country as well? Because it was new. My Kiswahili was terrible. I thought it was better than it was. So, it was just a lot of hard adjustments I had to make. I thought wrongly that entrepreneurism would be easier than it's been. It's been extremely hard. And it's all these, and so it's been a very hard experience, but one I wouldn't change because there's just so many lessons I've picked up about myself and life that only Kenya could have given me. So
okay, let's just dig a little bit into some of the things that you pointed out. So when you're talking about the interactions you have with people and the community where you are, do you feel accepted? What has the response been? Do they say, oh yeah, she's Kenyan? It's
so funny you ask me that because I used to care about things like that when I was younger, but I don't think I care anymore if people accept me, to be quite honest. I am who I am. I did used to struggle with that when I would meet Kenyans in the US because where just the where I wasn't meeting a lot of Africans or even Kenyans a lot. And so as I moved into university, suddenly there was a lot of Kenyans and I was so excited to connect with them. And I struggled with that a little. And so I was always worried about how can I be accepted? And then I think because I just wasn't, I stopped caring as much anymore and just worried more about meeting people who I'm on the same wavelength with, whether they're Kenyan or not. Luckily, I met some great Kenyans who I had same wavelength with. But I think as someone who's just moved around quite a bit, I just look for who is a cool person. I'm weird. I'm really weird and quirky, and I'm a nerd, and I mess up a lot in terms of social cues. So if you're someone who is similar or can accept me as me, then we can roll. If not, changes. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess, especially as you came back to Kenya in an entrepreneurial role, what was it like building your network? Because I think in Africa, your social currency needs to be like on point.
Yeah, and especially coming from the US where um, you, yes, you have to be well networked, but my work ethic and my resume or whatever can carry me places. And for a long time, I came and I was like, I had no network. Like I had a network, but it was not tiny compared to people who've lived here their whole lives. I was really starting from zero. And that was extremely difficult. I struggled with also taking advantage of my parents' network because I was like, I'm going to do this on my own. Whereas you just have to use whatever gateway you can to connect with people. So it was, and I'm also not the most social person. I can go days by myself and be very, very good. I don't need to see people. So it was a struggle, but, and I had a lot of doors slammed in my face or just not taken seriously. I also think there's this perception which I tried not to fall into, that people who come from abroad think they're better or know more than locals. And I actually see people doing that. And I made sure I was really kind of particular about not coming off that way. But over time, you connect with people and it grows. And honestly, I'm not the best networker, so I don't even know if I should be answering this question. Because it's a muscle to keep networking.
Yeah.
If networking was like working out, then she hasn't been to the gym. But what it is when I need to meet a person, I make it happen. And in a professional setting, I'm great. But when networking, which also involves a lot of socializing, which is not necessarily my forte or my interest, a lot of the time, I've struggled in that sense. But I think I'm making efforts here and there to get there.
Yeah. So I guess I want to find out from you. Earlier you said that when you came to Kenya, you actually realized like, whoa, I'm actually quite American. Like, what are some examples you can give of what made you say, okay, there's a bit of a difference here?
Yeah. I think it's just mindset in terms of how one would approach anything. I'm trying to think of like a good example. I really feel it's as simple as if we were crossing the road, you would look left and right, and I would look right and left. It's really that way of how we approach things. A basic one is I'm always extremely on time. Always extreme, but I don't know if that's is that an American thing? Because everyone was late, so I don't know. I'm interested to email over phone calls, working all the time. After 5 is still working. Weekends, Sunday is still a work day for me, and understanding people's boundaries around that. Simple things like that. The most basic examples I think I can give you. Yeah.
The time thing, I feel like, when you're abroad, you really cannot afford to not be on time. Like time is of the essence. And I think, however long you stay there, you work there, you get that drummed into you. And coming back, I find that is a challenge for a lot of people that come back. Yeah.
And being late is okay. Life happens. But for me, it's like, if I know I'm running late, 20 minutes beforehand, an hour beforehand, you will communicate. You know when you're going to run late, and sometimes just communicating, the other person can adjust accordingly. And so for me, I've struggled with is the lack of communication. So it's 5 minutes after, and then you're like, I'm running late, or sort of the lackadaisical. Am I still on? The lackadaisical like, yeah, I was late, no big deal. Energy is what I struggle with a little as a sort of a type A, and my day is scheduled like this.
Oh, like I could have
but
been
I've gotten
doing
used to it. Right? Or there's something else coming up after this, and I will then be late for that.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it's fair to say it's an African thing. I get worried about. Is it? Because the Africans were on time, but you know what? The majority of
I'd say it's an 80%
late.
African thing.
Try to be nice. 80, maybe even 90. We can even go higher.
Like somewhere there. So, okay, I guess whilst we're still on this, what are your views on the practicality of adopting foreign, business practices and, work ethics and all of that, and then, adapting them into when you return back to your home country and, you want to start a business? How has that worked out for you?
I think because of the work I do and because the world is global, you need these practices feel foreign, but they're actually just general, basic, international decorum around business, I think. And it's funny, and there are people who hire specifically for that. Like there was a company that I did consultancy for when I first moved back, where it was a recruiting company and they only hire people who have worked abroad. That was their thing. And the backlog of companies looking to hire these people was extremely high. And I when I first came back, I was like, it's unfair. Just because you've been abroad doesn't mean that you should be hired before a local trained or local educated person. And but then also I understand why some companies go for foreign trained employees, because there's just sometimes, and I hate to say this, but sometimes there's just a way one moves, one does business, one thinks, one gives feedback, one communicates that just, it cannot be taught, or there's no time to teach, that sometimes one picks up outside, unfortunately. And outside can mean many things. It can be Tanzania. I don't know. It can be, be, it doesn't have to be far away for it to be outside. And I just think even if a little experience abroad working can drive some of those things home.
So, you call yourself, you mentioned that you were a late bloomer, and I'd love for you to expand that for us. What does that mean to you?
And I still think I'm a late bloomer. I think when it came to school and work, I've always been a superstar. But then when it comes to sort of social cues and so forth, I've always, for me, that's what I mean, late bloomer. Things that tended to come very easily to other people were slow for me because I was always in the books. I wasn't out socializing as one that's important in life to do. And so I've always felt like I was just, especially once I was outside the classroom or outside the workplace, I just always felt that I was a little behind. And I think a lot of people who know me and perhaps might see me as like someone who is quite successful or has achieved a lot might be surprised by that. But that's just always how I felt. Like I'm just always a little behind. And I've been feeling that a lot lately with, because I chose entrepreneurism, and entrepreneurism sometimes can have very, very slow returns. And when I'm looking at my peers, they're like getting married and kids and buying a house, and if you can, they're doing those things, and I'm so far away from that, which also adds to my feeling of like I'm still chasing as well. That's more of a recent feeling of things with me at this point, but I've always felt like a late bloomer. Yeah.
So what would your advice be to somebody who does feel like a late bloomer and just doesn't feel that they are at the same stage as their friends?
Yeah, one of the conversations I was having with my best friend recently is like, what is our definition of success? And because in life there's markers. I guess there's markers in which you use to see if you're on track. In school it was easy. It was like standard 1, standard 2, and so then you graduate and then it's like first job, whatever. And then after a while the markers get a little blurry in terms of timelines. And so you could be pursuing different things from other people, but it's easy to look for what are the things we all have in common that are markers of where you are in life. And when I was speaking to my best friend recently, it was around like, what is considered success? Because I think a lot of what the markers I'm looking at are markers for if I stayed in the US and if I stayed in sort of a 9 to 5. And even if I did entrepreneurism, it would be entrepreneurism in the US, things like that. And so it's just like there was no chance for me to even compete with those. And then what does then success mean for a life where you've taken the road less traveled per se? And that's a little harder because it has to be defined by you. And which is, as someone who has always sort of looked outside for approval from other people in society, that's really hard for me to figure out. But if you can figure out for yourself as a late bloomer, then really you're not a late bloomer. You're right on time. And it's easier for me to give that advice to people than to take it.
Yeah, I was going to say, so what's your definition of success, ma'am?
Oh, I don't know. I think I'm really still working on that. I wish I could say I knew what it was. I'm really struggling with defining that for myself. And I think that's what 2021 is for me, finding the clarity of what success means for me. I think independence is a part of it, and a level of freedom is a part of it. How that shows up to me, I've yet to decide. And let me just say at least those two things is what I can at least say. Yeah.
Yeah. So I know 2020 was a rough year for everybody. Everybody had a rough year, but you described it as a point where you reached rock bottom in your business. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Legally, I can't really go into the details.
Okay. All right.
Which tells you a lot. But it was just the worst year, and it wasn't necessarily, it was on all levels, financial, everything was just rock bottom. And it was extremely difficult to the point where I think I was like, okay, Kenya, I'm done. See ya, going to the US. And let me go where COVID seems to be thriving, kind of. And part of rock bottom is reaching a point, because whenever anyone starts a business, you have high expectations, and of course, only success, of course. Right. And for things to not work out however I planned was just extremely humbling. And when you're at rock bottom, and I don't use that word lightly, rock bottom, it really was bottom of the dregs. What comes with that is loss of self, loss of confidence. I had dealt with a bout of depression, had to go to therapy, lost friendships, money. There's just a lot that goes around with that work, with that. And so it was extremely difficult. But what I can say now, having been on the other side of that, not fully recovered, but definitely not at rock bottom is that rock bottom is a blessing.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, because it strips you of everything that you might hold on to that defines yourself, because you're so humbled by it that all you can do is just let go of things. And when you're at the bottom, the only way to go is up.
That's true. Ain't that that is the truth.
Even better, you get to decide how you move up and out of rock bottom, because again, everything has been stripped of you. So it's like, what do I want? How am I moving forward? What are the lessons I need to take from this so that I don't run into this ever again? Because I never want to be there again. And if it happens, it happens, but I will do my damnness not to get to that level. And so the life I'm now building after that, there's legit before 2020 BC and AD for me. Like it's my lifestyle. Yeah. Also in terms of how I take care of myself, my health, what's into me, what matters. Those are that's what rock bottom means to me today. But I'm also excited about speaking about this in 6 months or a year's time, because then I know where I'll have blossomed into or not bumped into again. This life will be completely different than it is today. So
I guess, when, like you said, when we start businesses, we're always thinking about, oh, it's going to be amazing. Everybody's going to love it. It's going to blow up and it's going to be amazing. But when you do reach rock bottom, like you've described the emotions behind that, and, just the process of what you went through or are going through. And I would like to find out from you, what tools did you use to not stay at the rock bottom? You know what I mean? Because I think when people find themselves in, let's say, dire situations, they get trapped in that depression. And then it's just like a cycle. But how do you come out of that? How do you at least take a step to not staying there and having hope for something better?
It's step by step. It's not like you wake up one day and say, hey, I'm ready for better. It's just step by step. I think for me, I realized I couldn't do it myself. I needed help. Yeah. And I'm not someone who asks for help ever. So like there were phone calls even to friends and family where I was like, I kind of need you to step in because I can't, because I can't figure this out myself. I needed to get professional help. And I know mental health and therapy is like a thing, the big thing here in at least in Kenya to talk about and people struggle with. And I was lucky enough to be able to afford accessing professional help. But really it was more like I need people in my life to help me get back up, because there was a period in time where I was like, I'll figure it out, but I could not figure it out at all. Mm-hmm. And depression shows up in so many ways. There's some people who are depressed and they can still function. I was getting to that stage of non-functioning. So I was like, someone needs to pull me out of the bed and put me out of the door in order to show up. And, and I'm extremely independent. I don't have children, and my partner at the time was long distance. And so it was easy for me to be by myself, even though I had family, like my parents and siblings, but they were not near me. And so there were just people I had to sometimes you just have to notify people because people don't know. Everyone knows, 2020, everyone was going through their day-to-day stuff. So also the energy to reach out was not necessarily open for people. And for me, it was just learning to say, I need help was a big one for me. Yeah.
And that is so powerful. And I'm so grateful that you found the strength within yourself to just ask for help and reach out to your community and let them know this is what's happening. And I think, also I call it like the strong friend syndrome, when everyone's so used to you being the independent one, like, no, she's good, she's strong, she's fine, you know what I mean? And nobody checks on you. It's so hard to be the first person person to say, listen, guys, I need help. And, just saying it out loud. So I'm very grateful that you shared that with us and that you actually did it and found strength in your community and in professional help. That's therapy.
Girl, after the year we just had, I know as an entrepreneur and a leader, things got real lonely really fast. Uncertainty has become the order of the day, and yet we must continue to not only survive but thrive. So as a leader, who do you turn to fill your cup? To give you inspiration, to teach you and to mentor you? We have created a community just for this very reason, to support each other, to hold each other accountable, and to be each other's cheerleaders. This group is called the Africana Women Visionaries because we're looking past the storm and are focused on the vision we have for our companies and the African continent. Join the Africana Women Visionaries free Facebook group to learn more. Now back to the conversation.
I guess on a lighter note, I was very curious. So back when you were working for Christian Science Monitor, you took a road trip from Boston to, was it LA? Where is it? Where did you go? LA, yes. And first of all, I love a good adventure, but girl, I don't know about that. A whole road trip across the States. But I just wanted to find out from you, what was that experience like? And just tell us a little bit about that.
Chulu, your research is on point. Girl, you do your research. This road trip. So it started because one of my closest friends in the office was being moved to LA to report in LA. And so it was this sort of trip. I had time off. And so it was this trip that me, and I think two other people were supposed to take.
Okay.
Just move her to LA from Boston where we lived.
Yeah.
And, I'd never been to the West Coast, and this American road trip, we have images of what that is like. And then the office heard that we were going. And they were like, oh, 2 journalists on the road. Why don't you write a story about it? And we were like, oh, we're going to have to work through it, which, worked out because they paid for everything and we could still pick our route.
Okay.
But we had to work the whole time. And basically it was the first time I got a cover story actually with the magazine. Because we ended up writing about what it means, how American millennials are viewing life, et cetera, But it was amazing. We went from Boston, which is Massachusetts, into New York, into Pennsylvania briefly, Ohio, some of those middle states that are flat, I don't remember them, and then into St. Louis, Chicago. It was just beautiful. And I really would love more than anything to do the same kind of trip in Africa,
Right.
There are people who do those road trips from north to south. I don't think I want to do all of that, but I at least would like to go from Nairobi all the way down and just stop and see and eat and talk to people and connect.
Yeah.
I think that would be completely fabulous. So it took us about a week and a half to do the whole road trip, and it was really excellent. I had fun.
Yeah. So did you just walk up to people randomly and just be like, oh, we've got a question for you?
Yeah, as in that's journalism. You just talk to people. So we'd be, and of course you get used to rejection because when people are like, you must be, trying to sell me something, or no, I'm not interested in your religion or whatever.
Yeah.
And it'd be my friend who I was traveling with was a bit nervous about going up to people. So we'd go into a cafe and sit and be like, do they look like millennials? How old do they look? We should talk to them. But what the funny thing is, and I don't even think it's an American thing, people are friendly in the world. Just tell them, hey, my name is this. I'm working on a story like on this. I'd love to talk to you about your experience doing whatever. And as you know, Chulu, with the podcast, people are not always often asked about themselves. And so they feel so honored that someone would bother even asking them something as simple as what coffee do you prefer to drink in the morning. It tells you a lot in terms of like people don't get opportunities to talk about themselves. And once they get going, it's hard to keep them quiet actually most of the time. Yeah.
Who was your favorite person that you met?
Gosh, this trip. I don't even know what state we were in anymore. It was one of those middle states that's flat, maybe Kansas. And I think it's Route 84, which is a famous route where like motorcycle group of motorcyclists go and drive American style. And we followed one group because it was very strange because they were all Asian. Yeah. And we're like, what is this Asian group that's just going? So we followed them for like 2 hours, just trying to figure out where they were going. And it turned out that they were this like Japanese, like best friends who were just coming to America to road trip. But the most interesting person was their host, the guy who was actually taking them up and down the trip, because he was just a really cool, interesting guy who had done a lot in life. Gosh, there are just so many interesting places and experiences. I wasn't prepared for this, so I'm trying to remember. That's the one that comes to mind at this point.
Yeah. But tell me about journalism. You know, you talk about taking a road less traveled. How did you come to find yourself in this world of journalism?
Yeah, and I don't even do a lot of journalism as much anymore. I use the skill set a lot, but I don't do it as much. My thing is, I was always good at many things, but the thing that I didn't have to think about was writing. And I think deep down, I wanted to become like a novelist, but I didn't have the balls really to do it because how do you make money as a novelist? We don't know, but at least journalism, you can track that a little better. And one of my mentors was a lady who was quite well known in the news in the US. Her name was Gwen Eiffel. And
okay, hold up right there. You need to tell the story of how you met Gwen. You're not going to pass that one by.
Gwen. So Gwen is, for a long time, I thought I was going to go into finance and then, let me go work on Wall Street or something. And then realized like, well, this is really not what I want to do. So it was a summer where I was home and an internship that I didn't end up taking. And my mom was like, you're not just going to sit in this house, go somewhere to figure out a job. And I was nearby, and she knew like journalism. I'd always done school newspaper and so forth. She was like, go check out this TV station nearby, which was a PBS affiliate in DC, Washington, DC, where we were. So I was going for this position, which I think in hindsight was like an internship with Ken Burns, the documentarist, because it was his films were in the same place. But at this time, who is Ken Burns? Who is Gwen Eiffel? It was nothing to me. And so I was on the elevator on my way up, and this other Black woman enters the elevator, and she asked me where I'm going. And I was like, 5th floor. And she was like, she basically dragged me to be interviewed by someone. And I went through the interview process and so forth. But it turns out I didn't go to the right interview. She dragged me to be interviewed for her show. Really.
She hijacked
me too. And I did not know this because I was like, oh, she must know where I'm going. And it was 2008. Was it? Yeah. So this was And she was very big in the political journalism space. So that year, this is now when Obama is about to become president.
Yeah.
And so she was the lady who did the moderator of the vice presidential debates between Palin and now President Biden. And so I got a job with her. And what serendipity that was, I don't know what she saw in me. And she was like, no, you're going to come work for me. And I stayed that summer. And then I even took a semester off of school because I was like, this is the best internship. This is an election year. I am on the inside. I want to do this. And I think that's why I went into journalism. And that's why I think I fell in love with her more than I fell in love with journalism and that experience. Because I think I've always been chasing that high of what that experience was like for me. And she was a force. She was the first. She would tell me to come to meetings to take notes for her, but which was not necessary. And it would be like meetings with like the board and so forth. And my internship had nothing to do with that, but I would go to these meetings and she was like the only Black woman among a sea of white men, just in charge.
Yeah.
Putting them in their place, showing them who's boss. And that was just so, so important to me. And I didn't realize until many years later that she was sponsoring me. Like she would make calls on my behalf. She would make sure, sometimes people would like meet me and be like, come. And I would be like, I'm so lucky. But really it was Gwen had made a call beforehand and so forth. So sometimes you just meet, I don't think mentor is the right word. Sometimes you just meet angels in your industry or in your life who are just like, I'm going to pour into you. And if you do, you're so lucky to get that. And if you can't, tell them thank you. Because I never got a chance to tell her thank you. Because she passed a couple of years ago because she was sick, but she didn't tell anyone she was sick. And
I'm going to start crying here. Okay, go ahead.
She was sick. And I remember this was before I moved to Kenya. The last time I saw her, I was like, I'm moving. And she started crying. And I was like, oh, okay. She never cried. She was never a crier. But then at the time, in hindsight, now I know she was already ill, And so, if there are people in your life who are just angels who advocate for you, who just come through for you for no reason and not wanting anything in return, just say thank you, honor them, give them their flowers when they're alive, and then also replicate that as well. If there's people in your life who show promise, sometimes all a person needs is just someone to be like, you've got this, keep showing up, et cetera, et cetera. So if you can do that for others, definitely do. I know I haven't been doing it enough, but it just makes such a difference in one's life. There's so much crying in this interview. My goodness.
I know, and I'm crying now. I just find it so beautiful that, someone can, be in an elevator and just see this young girl and see something deeper. Whatever your conversation was, there's something that really just resonated with her that she thought, listen, I need to take her up with me. So as I'm breaking these glass ceilings, I'm reaching back and I'm taking this young lady with me, putting her in boardrooms, seeing what it looks like for a Black woman to be in a leadership position like that. And I have to cry.
I didn't know I did not know who she was. And even once I started the job, I was like, I don't know who the hell this lady is. I just did not know who she was and how important she was. And honestly, if she had just chosen that day to just be in the elevator with me and then come out, she changed my whole life trajectory by that one decision. Because after that, I went back to school, worked at the TV station there, applied to Columbia journalism. There's just things that I started to do. I don't even think I'd be working in podcasting and so forth, because everything tracks back to a lot of what she's taught me over the years. So like people can really just change your life in 1 second. And I'm so grateful that I was lucky enough to know her. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think also something that I am getting from your story is the bravery to show up for yourself. Like, yeah, your mom did push you and say, listen, you ain't gonna stay here the whole holiday. But, there are times that, I send out like opportunities. There's this opportunity, that opportunity, but people don't actually show up. But when you do just take yourself, go and show up, you just never know what can open up for you.
Yeah. I agree. And I think even more importantly is show up even when you're not ready. Because there was no way I was ready for that interview, but I showed up. My job was to be in that elevator that day. That was it. That was all God was asking of me for that day. And it was easy for me to just roll over and be like, I'm sleeping this summer. I don't know. I just get to hang. Just show up when you're not ready. And just be your best self if you can. And sometimes things work out, sometimes they don't, but you never know in this world.
Know. Oh, okay, that's a beautiful place for us to start winding down. It's passed so quickly. So I say I'm like a nosy poop.
So anyway, this was great.
So in the Africana women community, we have a little saying that is, know your roots, grow your purpose. And I have some quick fire questions for you. They're just 4 of them. So just tell us whatever comes to your mind. You ready?
Okay. All right, Paula, BPC. Correct. Like
No, you can say whatever you want. Go on.
All right, OZ. Okay.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So what are you rooted to?
What am I rooted to? I am deeply rooted in my family and who and where I have come from, because I am where I am because people made certain decisions that brought me here. There's this saying that I learned in the US is like, specifically for Black women, when you enter a boardroom where you don't see people like you, just know you're walking in with hundreds and thousands who came before you. And I do like that saying, and I think it's the same for whoever you are.
Yeah. So, I come as one and stand as 10,000. Maya Angelou.
Oh, yes. It's Maya Angelou. Thank you. And so for me, and it's 10,000 in terms of the people in my family, and that's who I am extremely rooted to in the best possible way. Yeah.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Okay. What are your favorite ways to nourish your spirit, your mind, and your body?
To nourish my spirit is spirit, mind, and body. Okay. To nourish my spirit is reading. I think that just nourishes me spiritually in all kinds of books. It's just being with a book is a holy endeavor, I think.
Yeah.
And reading is a spiritual giving, I think. For my mind, meditation, being outside with nature, it does that for me. And then for my body, that when I wake up and I stretch, not waking up stretching, that just nourishes me, because I have this thing where when I stretch and I wake up, I check in and I say, what hurts? Then I ask, what doesn't hurt? What feels good? So whether it's my fingers are arthritic, whether it's my period pains, whether it's my back, I check in with my whole body. And that for me just nourishes, that check-in nourishes me fully. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's so good. Take that one. Okay. Do you have a weakness that became your superpower?
I think I'm coming to terms with how I'm weird. And I was always embarrassed about how weird I was and quirky. And I really am. And I used to try so hard to hide it from people. Mm-hmm. But then what has always been great is that I can spot someone who is weird from across the room and who feels uncomfortable. And I'm very good at blocking everyone out and being like, I'm going to make you feel comfortable in the ways I can't make myself feel comfortable in this moment. So I guess that's a super strength. And then, but I'm learning also to accept myself a lot more lately. So,
Okay. And the last one, what do you know for sure?
Oh, that's from the Oprah book, right? What do I know for sure? Today, what I know for sure is that there is a lesson in everything. There's this day that I'm dreading. And sorry, the lesson is that you get to decide what something means to you. My reason for that is that there's this day that's coming that I am completely dreading. I have the worst feelings about it and so forth. And I was with my therapist yesterday and I told her I'm going to disengage everywhere for that day. No one will see me that day. And then she said, so what are you going to do once you've disengaged? And I was like, what do you mean? And she was like, well, what are you going to do? Are you just going to sit at home in the dark under your covers? And I was like, oh, like I'm allowed to do something. And so her homework was basically go plan a day for yourself. Great day for yourself. And suddenly I spent a lot of today planning it. And I have the best day that's about to come in a couple of weeks that I have planned. And suddenly this day that I was dreading so much has turned into a day that I am looking forward to. So honestly, everything is perspective. You get to decide what something means to you, how you respond to something. You really get to decide. And it's just a simple mind shift. That I know for sure today. Maybe not tomorrow, but definitely today. Yeah.
Oh, Paula, you are phenomenal. You're like, I just love learning from you and getting to know you better. And I'm so grateful that our paths crossed and we met. And thank you so much for coming on the Africana Woman podcast. Can you please tell the audience where they can find out about what you are doing, how they can contact you, and if you've got any programs that you have, let us know.
Yeah, so you can follow me at Kali Boss, which is at KALIBAWSE on Twitter or Instagram. That's where I am. And I have so many things in the works that I can't really talk about just yet. But one thing you can look forward to, I guess, is I'm working on a podcast about African female writers. And we've been able to interview some of Africa's best writers. Every time they say yes, I'm shocked. And that's coming very, very soon in 2020. So if you listen to this sometime later in 2020, you'll know exactly what podcast I'm talking about. And if it's anything to do with Africa and podcasting, that's my forte. That's my thing. Definitely look out for me and reach out however you want on those social media networks that I mentioned. Yeah. And I respond to DMs. So.
Yeah. And guys, Africa Podfest is coming up. So could we get a bit more info?
Yes, Africa Podfest, which I co-founded, is the continent's first podcast festival. And we were supposed to have our first one in person last year in March in Nairobi, but COVID came and just knocked us down. And so we're going to have a virtual version of Podfest on February 12th, which is also Africa Podcast Day. And so you can definitely go check that out at africapodcastfestival.com.
Awesome. Okay, we have come to the end of this wonderful discussion. Always a pleasure talking to you, Paula, and I hope you'll be able to come back to the podcast in the future. And again, thank you so much.
Thank you, Chulu. This was great. I am so honored to have been a guest on your show. Thank you.
Did you enjoy that conversation with Paula? She is a beautiful human being. Please reach out to her on social media at Cali Media. Let her know you heard her on Africana Woman Podcast and tell her what you learned from the conversation. We talked about hitting rock bottom. I think it is so important to realize there will always be ups and downs in life. Therefore, it helps to plan ahead as best as possible. My dear sister, Herdine Mercia, the chief grief crusader, calls it a grief action plan. So I want you to make a plan by answering these 3 questions. If you find yourself in a situation where you hit rock bottom, 1, who are the people that you can reach out to and be completely honest with about what is going on in your life? 2, what are the things you will absolutely not do to get out of the situation? This is creating boundaries. 3, what activities can you do to process the emotions you are experiencing at the rock bottom? This could be journaling, taking a walk, singing, whatever works for you, okay? Remember, we're making this plan ahead of time so as if we do hit rock bottom, we can take it out and follow our own guidelines and instructions when we were in a better state of mind. I hope this blesses you. Let me know how it goes. Thank you so much for making us part of your day by listening in. I truly appreciate you. Please help me get the word out about Africana Woman Podcast. All you have to do is take a screenshot of this episode and post about it on your socials. Don't forget to tag me at Chulu by Design. Now you know my playground is Instagram, yeah? If you want to chat with me personally, drop me a line. So until next week, I want you to remember, know your roots, grow your purpose. This has been a production of Ulendo Creative Media. You can find out more about their services on ulendocreative.com.